Brukot habaot, ladies, and welcome to another edition of our Torah classes. And whether you're logging on to TorahAnytime.com or to ohelsara.com, or if you're a YouTube subscriber, which I hope you're subscribing, and if you're not, it's never too late. We want to thank you so much, and we're so proud of you. I am so proud of you for tuning in every single time there's a shiur that's posted, and you're enhancing your neshama and working so hard to elevate yourselves spiritually. Ashrechem. It's now Erev Sukkot. Can't believe we've come to this time of year. I wanted to take the time to thank a few people. As you know, we have a long campaign running for the Yamim HaNoraim to try to help Ohel Sarah, my organization, to make it through at least this half year. And I want to thank every single person who made a concerted effort to donate. And the campaign is still running through the 7 days of Sukkot, so it's still not too late to log on to www.ohelsara.com and to donate. It's such a special time, Sukkot, to be able to donate for families, needy families, yatomim, orphans, people who really don't have the money to make it through the Chag. If you could still have the opportunity to do that, for us, it's now early morning. For you guys, it's b'chal, the middle of the night. But when this shiur will post, it will be early morning for you, and you'll still have the entire day and the whole 7 days, actually, chutz from, of course, the Yom Tov itself that you're not really supposed to be logging on, but you'll have the opportunity to donate. But at this point, I would like to thank the following people who donated the last few days. Thank you so much to Esther Vanunu for donating. Thank you so much to Sherry Geiger, to Vera Kessler. What an amazing contribution. Thank you so very much for that incredibly generous donation. Thank you. Thank you to Swinda Lawrence. Thank you to Wen Huang. Thank you so much. You've been a constant supporter. To Catherine Miriam Tolliver. Leilui Nishmat Shabtai Ben Moshe Alav Shalom, who is her son-in-law's grandfather, who passed away Erev Yom Kippurim at age 98. So, Leilui Nishmato, Yishav Aliyat Neshama. Thank you, Mrs. Tolliver, for all of your generous donations. We truly appreciate it. Thank you to Brandy Irby. So sweet of you. To LMD Training and Consulting. I'm not sure if I read the name correctly over the email. I think it's Aline, but please do email me what your name is so I can actually thank you appropriately. But thank you so much for that incredibly generous donation for your children's well-being. Be'emet, you helped us so much with that incredible donation. And I want to thank Michelle, whose last name I want to leave out because she asked me not to say her last name. She wanted to remain anonymous, for that incredibly generous donation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should strengthen your spirituality, should give you tremendous clarity in your life, should give you a lot of blessings and parnasat tova, tremendous sustenance to be able to continue to be a giver in your life. Because as you know, when you give, you're not just giving, you're getting in return. Thank you so very much for being such an incredibly inspirational supporter of Ohel Sarah. Thank you so much to Virginia Giuseppe. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Thank you to Jenny Wankmuller, or I think it's Vankmuller, if I'm saying it correctly. And thank you to Adina Hirschberg. You guys have been incredibly amazing. Everybody who's been donating. And Bezat Hashem, I hope you continue to donate this whole entire week, whoever hasn't yet had an opportunity. This week's shiur is in dedication and in memory of two very special people. First of all, Leilui Nishmat Yitzchak ben Yechezkel, alav shalom, and to my former Rav, who unfortunately passed away at a very young age, many, many, many years ago, Harav Moshe Chai ben Aharon v'Shulamit Simantov, alav shalom, zchuto yagen alenu, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. He was a very, very special person. I actually never thought I'd have the opportunity to meet members of his family here in Eretz Yisrael, because most of his children live in America. But I was zecher just a few weeks ago to meet his brother and his sister-in-law and his nieces. What an incredible experience it was, because his brother looks exactly like him. He speaks like him. It was just, and we were able to reminisce about his righteousness and what an amazing person he was. And he actually passed away on the first night of Chol HaMoed Sukkot. So it was a tremendous tragedy. He died at the age of 43, leaving 8 children behind and a wife. It was a tremendous tragedy. And Baruch Hashem, I've had quite a number of opportunities to visit his kever in the last, I would say, 5 years. Some people didn't even know about it, but I did things quietly, and I shared it only with one individual who I felt would understand the depth of having to visit my Rav's kever that I, ignored all the years because I had a very hard time doing it. But 5 years ago, I finally had the strength to do so, and I did it with a particular individual who came to help me and was there with me and inspired me, and it was an incredible experience, and it was a sad experience. But I'm happy to be able to dedicate a shiur leilui nishmato in honor of Sukkot. May his entire family still feel the nechama of Hashem as we, even so many years later, mourn the loss of this great tzaddik who passed away on Yud Chet Tishrei, on the 18th day of Tishrei, the first night of Chol HaMoed. And may every single word and inspiration that we draw from this shiur, I don't even know if I could say should create an aliyat neshama for him, because I'm sure he's on very high levels in the shamayim, but he should continue to climb even higher. Ladies, it's customary that on the first day of Sukkot, we read Sefer Kohelet, which was written by Shlomo HaMelech, the son of David HaMelech, Aleim HaShalom. Therefore, in honor of Sukkot, I wanted to offer an amazing lesson, Dafka on Erev Sukkot, when we're so busy baking and doing and cleaning. Dafka to inspire you with a lesson from Sefer Kohelet that will help, hopefully, enhance your Chag, uplift it, inspire you, and especially those who are married. Especially those who are married. And the pasuk we're going to learn today is in Perek Daled, that's chapter 4, pasuk Tet, which is verse 9. Shlomo HaMelech writes, Tov hashnaim min ha'echad. 2 are better than 1. Asher yesh lahem sachar tov ba'amalam, for they have good reward for their toil. The Midrash Rabbah Bereshit recounts a story of a prominent Gentile woman who approached Rabbi Yossi bar Chalafta alav shalom, and she asked him, Lekama yamim bara hakadosh baruch hu et olamo? Rabbi, how many days did it take God to create the world? Amar la, he said to her, Lesheshet yamim, God created the world in 6 days. Amra lo, she said to him, Ma hu oseh me'ota sha'a v'ad achshav? Well, what is God doing from the time that he finished creating the world until now? Amar la, he said to her, Hakadosh baruch hu yoshev u'mezaveg zivugim. God sits on his throne of glory and he pairs people up. He's involved in getting people together, getting them married, or somehow putting souls together. He's bringing certain people together for tikkunim that have to be wrought in the world. An interesting story. Now, it doesn't really end there, but that's where I'm going to stop because it's a huge lesson and there's so many points that could be covered and we don't have time for everything. So I'm going to deal with just one point. And the question is, what does it mean that Hashem is mezaveg zivugim, that he's busy pairing people up? Because when you make a shidduch, when you're making a zivug, you're actually taking two individuals and you're turning them into a zivug. You're turning them into a pair. A zivug is two people, from the Lashon zug, which means a couple. A couple is two people. Before you put two people together, they are not a zug. They're not a couple. They're yechidim. They're single individuals. So the proper terminology would be mezaveg yechidim. You're putting together individuals, just as it says in Sefer Teilim. Elokim moshiv yechidim baita. God settles the individuals in a home. Hashem is moshiv yechidim. He takes individuals and he connects them. But here, the Midrash is telling us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mezaveg zivugim. What does it mean that he's mezaveg zivugim? You don't need to be mezaveg a zivug because they're already a zivug. They're already a couple once you put them together. You need to be mezaveg yechidim. You have to put individuals together. That's the question. One of the answers is found in the Gemara of Sotah, where Chachamim tell us that 40 days prior to a child's conception, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes an announcement in the heavens saying, Bat Ploni le Ploni, the daughter of so-and-so will be married to so-and-so. So we see here that a zivug is created prior to conception and Hashem announces it. And the Rabbanim have a question about this. What do you mean that Hashem makes this heavenly announcement? I mean, are we implying that the match is made by God in the heavens prior to conception without any conditions? Because the Gemara makes it seem as if pairing people up is Hashem's business, and he's the one who decides who is going to be matched up with who. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because the Gemara also states that en mezavgim lo le'adam ela lefi ma'asav. The Gemara says that a person's spouse, his partner, is chosen according to his deeds, lefi ma'asav, according to what he truly deserves. So the Gemara itself seems to be questioning this whole concept of God being the only matchmaker versus a match that's being created according to a person's deeds. Which is it to be? Because one source is telling us that it's Hashem who's making the calculations of who's going to end up with who. And there are no exceptions and there's no stipulations over here. And by the way, there are times that we learn that a tzaddik, a righteous person, will end up with a marshat, a woman who's cruel and unkind. And sometimes the rasha, the evildoer, could end up marrying a tzaddiket, a very righteous woman. The opposite is also true. Two righteous people could end up marrying each other, and two evildoers can end up living together. But the point is that it seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one making the decision of who will be with who. And that's where we run into a little bit of a problem, because another Talmudic source is telling us that a partner is decided according to one's deeds and actions, lefi ma'asav, what he truly deserves. So which is it? Is it lefi ma'asav? Or is it Hashem who's taking care of matters without any conditions, without any reasons, or any requirements? And the Gemara answers, Ha bezivug rishon, ha bezivug sheni. What does that mean? Gemara is saying the first marriage is the zivug rishon. The second marriage is the zivug sheni. We need to clarify this. The Gemara is making a clear distinction and differentiating between how a first marriage works and the way a second marriage works. And I want to know what that means. What does that mean, a first and second marriage? Says the Gemara, Zivug Rishon, the first marriage, so to speak, is when God makes that heavenly announcement 40 days prior to conception. That zivug is not based on anybody's actions, deeds, righteousness, or evil doings. It's based purely on the makeup of the neshamot, certain tikkunim, certain rectifications, or gilgulim, reincarnations that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides for whatever reason that these two people have to be paired up and they have to connect. That's zivug rishon. But the zivug sheni is more about compatibility and lefi ma'asav, according to a person's deeds. That's the way the Gemara understands this idea. But I want to explain it a little differently, according to various chachamim. As we know, every marriage begins in Shamayim. God takes two souls, two neshamot, and he connects them. He puts them together. And that happens literally at his throne of glory, the Kiseh Kavod. He takes two individual neshamot and he turns them into one neshama. He fuses them together. Then at some point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes this one neshama and he separates it again and sends the male counterpart and the female counterpart down to this world. One soul can end up in New York. The other one can end up in Eretz Yisrael on the other side of the world. And there are times that these neshamot are dispatched into the world not at the same time, not necessarily at the same time. It could be that one is sent down a lot earlier than the other one by a few years. So the magic of the shidduch process is that somehow these two neshamot that were already fused together in Shamayim and now come down, having traveled through 4 various worlds. And when here, they're in 2 different locations, the miracle of the match is how these 2 neshamot find each other again. And Hashem, of course, is the one who orchestrates their meeting. Somehow the man who's in Eretz Yisrael has to travel to New York for whatever the reason may be. And while he's there, somebody introduces him to a young woman. And before they know it, they're standing under the chuppah. Every time a person gets married, say Chachamim, it's always referred to as zivug sheni. You should know that. Why? Because the zivug rishon already occurred in Shamayim. The first connection, the original zivug, was the one where HaKadosh Baruch Hu took these neshamot and paired them together, meaning Hashem took care of that in the heavens. The second zivug, the zivug shani, takes place here on earth. So every marriage is a zivug shani. That couple was attached in Shamayim. They were spiritually bound to one another as neshamot. That's what we would call, by the way, true soulmates. And then here on earth, they become one again in the physical sense. Now, we are not going to discuss, which some people do ask quite a number of times, how do I know if I'm married to the zivug rishon that HaKadosh Baruch Hu announced, and then that the zivug sheni, that when I married him, a lot of women ask, he's really the one that Hashem intended? We're not going to get into that. There is such a concept as not marrying the zivug rishon, There is such a concept as replacements that Hashem sends to people. There is a concept of missing the boat and marrying the wrong person. There is such a concept as that. And that's why you see a lot of conflict between couples at times. They're not necessarily married to the one that they were supposed to be married to, but we're not dealing with that today at all. We are dealing and stipulating that lechatchila, you're married to the one that HaKadosh Baruch Hu announced zivug rishon already in the heavens, and you ended up marrying this individual here on earth. Now, there is a famous Gemara in Sotah that states that putting two people together, finding a decent partner in this world, is as difficult as the splitting of the sea. Kashe zivugo shel adam kekriyat yam suf. The question is, how can you compare the splitting of the sea to finding a mate? It's like comparing apples to oranges, because the splitting of the sea is something that required actually dividing something. The sea was split. And a marriage is when you put two people together, when you're unifying them. So what kind of analogy is that? Kashe zivugo shel adam kikriyat yam suf. Doesn't make sense. I mean, couldn't the Chachamim find a better analogy? Perhaps an example of an occurrence where something is put together and united? How do we explain this? Well, if we look at the cycle of Kriyat Yamsuf, of the splitting of the sea, we'll see that the sea was originally one. The waters were bound together before they were split. But then they were temporarily divided. And then the waters went back to becoming one again. And that's exactly what happens with a zivug. The couple starts out as one when the neshamot are fused together in Shamayim. Then they're temporarily separated before they come down to this world. And then they become one again when they get married. So the analogy of Kriyat Yamsuf is very fitting. Therefore, as we mentioned, every time a person gets married, it's considered a zivug sheni. But what the Gemara in Sotah is stating is that the zivug rishon doesn't require us to do anything. That's out of our control, because it's God who announces who's going to be paired up with who. Bat ploni le ploni. That's Hashem's domain. And we don't have much of an input in that. We don't have a choice as to whether we agree to the zivug or not, because it's something that's decided for us prior to our birth. That's the concept of zivug rishon. But the zivug sheni is what the Gemara deems as lefi ma'asav, that it follows according to a person's deeds, which means that once you decide to marry someone, and hopefully you married the one who HaKadosh Baruch Hu announced in the heavens that should be yours, that's when you need to begin perfecting your character traits, your midot. And you need to do that in order to maintain the zivug. And that means that in the zivug sheni process, man has to make a concerted effort. And it's in the stage of marriage here on earth where the work truly begins. Why? Because if you hopefully ended up married to the person who God designated for you in Shamayim, you have to maintain that connection, you have to sustain it, and you have to elevate it. We maintain the zivug with constant work and the effort in order to create shalom bait, to create peace in the home. In general, Chachamim teach us that marriages are very, very fragile. And the purpose of the tikkun of that couple can be very easily derailed because of that fragility. And the reason why marriage is fragile is because it's an extremely intense relationship. All Chachamim talk about it. Think about it. You're living with a person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all the time, even in the same room. You're privy to that person's strengths, his ma'alot, his incredible nature, if we're talking about a woman towards a man, but we're also privy to their weaknesses, to their imperfections, to many flaws. And that means that the slightest misunderstanding, which in a normal relationship where you're not so close with somebody would be forgotten, Chachamim say that due to the intensity of the relationship, it's much harder to navigate, which means close relationships are not meant to be easy. And if they are, I don't know, darshani, but anyway, imagine, I'll put it to you this way. Imagine driving in a car that's speeding at 150 miles an hour. Any slight pebble, and a pebble is a small stone that's aimed at the window, is going to shatter the window. Whereas if we threw a tiny pebble on a window of a car that's stationary, nothing's going to happen. And that's something that people just don't understand. The greater the intensity of a relationship, the closer the relationship, the more fragile and the more tender things will be. And also at the same time, the more things will be magnified and even more damaging. Dafka, because of the velocity of the relationship, even the most minor error can cause a serious derailment. And people don't understand that. Sometimes, I speak with a woman or sometimes a man when I'm trying to help the couple, and they're like, well, all that happened was this little thing and it was blown out of proportion. It took days until things settled back. And yes, now we understand, because Chachamim say this is an intense relationship over here. The slightest pebble is going to cause a serious derailment because of the intensity of that relationship. People just don't get that. Therefore, the Gemara says that the zivug shani is lefi ma'asav. Once two people meet in the form of bodies, now it takes the ma'asim, the deeds, and their actions to maintain the relationship. Now, I'm going to tell you something shocking, which some of you may know, some of you may not know. But Chachamim tell us that the concept of marriage altogether goes against nature. Why? Because a man and a woman are extremely different. There was once a book, I didn't read it, but there was once a book titled Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. They were trying to say the polar opposites of one another. And Chachamim say that is true. They have different interests. They have different natures. Very interestingly, by the way, they did a study on children, little kids, and they realized that when little boys and little girls, when they were young, 2, 3, 4, 5, they didn't have had a problem playing together. They get along. They're okay. They love each other. They even call themselves best friends. But as they grow older, suddenly things change. We see that the boys want to play with and be around other boys, and the girls want to play with and have an affinity more to other girls. And that's something Chachamim say happens naturally. Why? Because as the males and females develop, their interests vary. Their souls become developed and their natures become more defined. And because their natures become so distinctly different, they naturally tend to separate. Chachamim tell us that it's a nes. It's a miracle that men and women get married all together because their differences and their natures are so pronounced. So what did Hashem in his infinite wisdom do? God knew that without creating some kind of mechanism that would bring these two opposite entities together, naturally, a man and a woman would not unite because of their obvious differences. So what did Hashem do? Chachamim say he created something called ta'ava. Ta'ava, simply put, means lust and or infatuation. So the ta'ava kind of takes the role of the shatchan, the matchmaker. Think about it. If a man and a woman would not have the ta'ava to unite, they wouldn't go near each other because there's no compatibility by nature. And they'd pretty much be happy leading separate lives and doing their own thing with their own kind, so to speak. A man would be happy getting together with his buddies, talking Torah or talking the latest business venture. And a woman would be happy meeting with her friends for lunch, discussing spirituality or other mundane matters. Each of them would be happy in the world they're familiar with, in the world that appeals to them, in the world that's most similar to them. So the ta'ava that a man suddenly develops for a woman and a woman for a man is the shatchan. And hopefully there is a ta'ava between the couple. And if there isn't a natural ta'ava, darshani, it's also an issue. But the ta'ava is the initial mediator, so to speak, between the man and woman. When you first meet someone that you're really and genuinely attracted to on all levels, suddenly you find this like attraction. You're attracted to their soul. That means spiritually. You're attracted to their mind. That's intellectually. You're attracted physically. That's materialistically, right? You're attracted. You're seeing stars. You're on cloud 9. And just being in that person's presence just fills you. All that, our rabbis tell us, is that initial setup process of bringing two people together. This is a chesed. It's a gift of Hashem, that attraction and that pull. Once you have that pull, once you have that genuine attraction, that intense longing and desire, you need to maintain the connection and the enthusiasm after the marriage. And that requires work. That's what we could assume the Gemara of Sotah means when it states the following. Derish Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva alav shalom explained, Ish ve'isha zachu, a man and a woman who merit, Shechina benehem, the divine presence is between them. Lo zachu, if they don't merit, Esh ochaltan, a fire consumes them. The Gemara is telling us that there are 3 partners in a marriage: the husband, the wife, and God, who's between them if they merit. Now, I could understand the man's partnership in the marriage. I can understand what the woman is doing in the marriage. But what's Hashem doing smack in the middle of the marriage? What's God doing there? What does it mean, Shechina benehem? Why does God have to be the third partner in the marriage? Isn't it enough that there's 2, a zivug? Why do you need a third? Ladies, a marriage founded on the principles of Torah cannot be maintained properly or upheld without the involvement of Hashem. Hashem is the one who's helping to maintain the zivug, because he's the one who initiated the process of their union in Shamayim. Once the 2 souls come together in this material world, things start to get a little bit more complicated. You know, the divorce rate in every single community is quite high in this generation. Not to mention something that's, I think, even worse than a divorce. And that's the couples who, in their heart of hearts, be'emet, when they really admit it, they secretly wish they could be divorced, but they remain together for selfish reasons. A marriage like that isn't maintained properly. And therefore, you see a lot of conflicts and issues, and nobody's truly happy in such a marriage. It's quite difficult today to maintain a marriage, let alone to live in a marriage with happiness and stability. So Hashem becomes the third partner, the referee, so to speak, and the arbitrator, who's helping to maintain the marriage by trying to create some semblance of shalom in that house between a man and a woman. And that's what Rabbi Yossi meant when he answered that Gentile woman, that this is what Hashem is doing after he's created the world. He's busy being mezaveg zivugim. It's not only that he's matchmaking and creating shidduchim between individuals. He's maintaining the union of the marriage. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being mezaveg zivugim. That's why the emphasis is on the word zivugim and not yachidim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is helping those who are already in the status of a zivug. They've already married here on earth, and they need the added support and the inspiration. And perhaps that's what's keeping him occupied, because keeping a marriage intact and creating shalom bayit between a couple, of course, we're talking about when it's a normal and healthy marriage, and when both people are really and truly emotionally stable, that takes a lot of hard work. And that teaches us the importance not of the zivug rishon, but the zivug sheni. The marriage that's formed here on earth is what needs work and dedication. How do we know that? Because when the malachim, when the angels came to visit Avraham Avinu, alav shalom, one of the first questions they asked was, Ayei Sarah ishtecha? Where's Sarah, your wife? And Avraham's response was, Hinei ba'ohel. Behold, she is in the tent. Now think about it. These were malachim, celestial beings. They know where she was. Why the need to ask such a question? And the Gemara says that the malachim wanted to point out to Avraham how modest, how tznoah his wife was, how important it was for her to maintain her modesty, hence being in the ohel. And they asked that question in order to bring to light a recognition that Avraham should have of his wife's modesty and to appreciate that in her. The malachim were trying to increase and maintain the shalom bayit. They wanted to endear Sarah in the eyes of Avraham. And I was always amazed at that, because if you think about it, Avraham and Sarah were married for probably over 60 years at that point in the story, right? She was 90 years old and Avraham was 100. And although they were married for so many years, they considered an elderly couple, the malachim still felt a need to go out of their way to enhance the shalom bayit. And that teaches me that no matter how long you're married, the marriage could always use a boost, a re-energizing, a renewed recognition, and a restored appreciation. And when that's missing in the marriage, the union begins to deteriorate and the feelings begin to fade, because that natural current of all the differences between a man and a woman can naturally cause a couple to drift apart. So if the couple is not making a concerted effort to fight against that natural current that's pulling them apart, they can become extremely despondent in the marriage and end up living together not as a real couple, not as a zivug, but as two individuals, as yachidim, who are merely surviving the marriage and just always trying to make things work, making it work. That's not a real marriage, Chachamim say. Now, when the Midrash discusses shidduchim, it means pairing two people up for a marriage, it points out that there will be times when the woman is brought to the man, and at other times when the man is actually brought to the woman. For example, in the case of Yitzchak Avinu alav shalom, his zivug, Rivka, the woman was brought to him. Here he was standing in the field, He looks up, and there she is, approaching on a camel. The zivug was brought to him. But in the case of Yaakov Avinu alav shalom, he actually had to go out in search of his zivug. He, the man, Yaakov, was brought to Rachel, to the woman. Question is, why does the Midrash have to tell me about the way in which a shidduch could occur? I mean, does it matter who's brought to whom as long as the shidduch happens? And the lesson we learn from this is that in a marriage, one of the ways to maintain the shalom bayit, to maintain the peace, is when each spouse concedes to the other. There are times when a wife must concede to her husband. She must approach him, so to speak, where she comes to his side. And there are times when the husband should concede to his wife and bring himself over to her side. In a marriage, both individuals have to learn how to yield to one another, especially when it concerns important matters of life. If a spouse is not yielding to the other because he's standing on principle, or because he wants to do things his way, or because he has personal agendas and commitments to who? To himself, first and foremost, to what he desires, to what he wants, that's not viewed as a positive partnership. If a woman does not accept her husband's viewpoint concerning pressing matters in life, when she knows that he's right, and she stands firm in her opinion because of her stubborn personality, or because of her own selfish motives and agendas, that too is a negative sign of that partnership. In a marriage where one cannot give in to the other for reasons that are not completely wholesome, Chachamim say that is not a true partnership. Now, we have to remember, obviously, that marriage is not a courtroom. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. Marriage requires wisdom. It requires chokhmah. And if a couple uses their wisdom properly, it will enable them to be at peace with one another. That's one of the reasons, by the way, why before we conclude the Tfilat HaAmidah and we say the words, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Alenu, we take 3 steps back. Why? Because before you can make peace with anybody, you have to be willing to move out of the position that you're in. You have to be willing to take a few steps back and consider. Because if you choose to stand there firm, unmovable, and stubborn, genuine shalom can never take place. You know, there was a woman who shared many issues that she had in her marriage with me. She shared it with me. It was very clear from the many examples that she gave, and also from knowing her husband and seeing her and seeing the marriage unfold. It was quite clear that this was not a healthy marriage. This was not a genuinely loving marriage. This was not a positive union over here. There wasn't a real partnership on many fronts. And at some point, when she decided to concede to something that he asked of her, which was clearly not going to be good, I asked her, why did you agree to this if you know that it isn't going to be good for you or your husband in the long run? And she said to me, well, I barely give in to him, and that makes him unhappy. So this time, I wanted to make him happy, so I gave in. And I said, you didn't give in. You gave up. And that's a big difference, ladies. Giving into something when you know it's detrimental to your future and that it could create more harm than good is not the solution either. You know, sometimes people just give up and they think they're giving in. They assume they're being the understanding spouse, the flexible spouse, the spouse who's conceding, like we just spoke about now, when in reality, they're destroying. In truth, they just don't want to deal with the reality of their marriage. So they give in when in truth, they've just given up. They just don't want to have to deal with the reality of their marriage. But going back to the pasuk in Kohelet, because I think now we can understand it a little better. Tovim hashnaim min ha'echad. Two are better than one. Now that you've got a little bit of background information, what do you think those words mean? Tov hashnaim. Who's the shnaim that Shlomo HaMelech is referring to? Who's these two? The shnaim is the couple. Shnaim is two. So the man and wife are the shnaim. Tov hashnaim min ha'echad. From the one God. What does that mean? It means that marriage is made in heaven by the one true God. The good that lies behind these two neshamot that merited to unite in Shamayim, Tovim Hashnaim, is something that these two souls, they had nothing to do with that. That was Min Ha'echad. That was something that the one and only God took care of. He's the one who united these two souls in Shamayim. However, what does the rest of the pasuk state? Asher yesh lahem sachar tov. But where does the couple come into play? Where they deserve credit, where they merit to receive the sachar tov, because they don't earn credit for something Hashem did. You know how they earn the sachar tov, the wonderful rewards? Ba'amalam. The end word of that pasuk. Ba'amalam means the work that they put into the marriage in order to maintain the shalom bayit. If you want the proper rewards and the incredible beracha to stream into your life, you have to work hard to maintain the shalom in your home. That's why zivug shani is lefi ma'asav. Whatever deeds, whatever actions and work you put into your zivug, whatever ma'asim you're going to engage in to enhance the zugiyut, is how that partnership is going to look. It's how that marriage is going to appear inside and out. Zivug shani lefi ma'asav. You realize how profound this interpretation of the pasuk in Sefer Kohelet is? And guess what? It's even deeper than that. And with this point, I will end. There's a tradition brought down in the Sfarim HaKadoshim that in the same way that we are obligated to observe the 613 mitzvot in the Torah HaKadosha, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also observing the mitzvot together with us. There are numerous gemariot that imply that Hashem himself is observing the mitzvot in his Torah. Now, Reb Heschel from Krakow, alav shalom, wrote in his Sefer Chavot Yair that there's one mitzvah in the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not fulfill. Which mitzvah is that? He says that there's a commandment to pay a daily worker on the day he worked for you. Beyomo titen secharo. You don't keep your daily employee, someone who worked for you for the day, waiting to receive his wages for the day's work. Apply that to our spirituality. Says Reb Heschel, here we are, doing the mitzvot, working very hard. We're servants of Hashem. And technically, we're doing this every day. And we should be receiving our reward at the end of the day, so to speak. Right? We worked. And yet Hashem says, Machar yekabel scharo. You'll receive your payment tomorrow. As if to say, your reward will be allotted to you at a future time. What do you mean, Machar yekabel scharo? What do you mean tomorrow? I want to be rewarded today for the work I did today. I mean, imagine a boss who tells you, by the way, I have your salary. I have your paycheck for the work you did today, but I'm not going to give it to you now. I'll decide when I'm going to give it to you. What do you mean? According to the Torah, that's considered an avon. It's a sin. Because beyomot titan scharo. If you're a daily employee, you should get paid at the end of the day. And in this case over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us from the very beginning, Machar yekabel et scharo. You have to work today. And, even if you're going to come to me and ask me for your due reward, I'm going to tell you that you're going to have to wait until tomorrow. And tomorrow doesn't literally mean tomorrow. I mean, I could choose to pay you next week, next month, next year, maybe in Olam Haba, maybe in another lifetime. What's going on over here? Says Reb Heschel. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu also observes the laws in the Torah, says Reb Heschel, he wants to know, what happened to the mitzvah of paying somebody their due wages at the end of a work day? What happened to beyomot titan secharo? Reb Heschel answers this question, ladies, with an amazing chidush. Listen very closely. It's a chidush that's based on something that's written in the Shulchan Aruch, in Choshen Mishpat, in the laws of beyomot titan scharo, because there are laws concerning wages, right? And he points out the Shulchan Aruch discusses a case where the employer had an agent, and he told the agent to hire a daily employee on his behalf. And the agent chose a perfect candidate, and he informed the new employee of the terms of employment, the time he has to show up, the day, how many hours he's going to work, the salary. Now, the halacha states that the employer is not doing any crime. He's not sinning by not paying that employee, because technically he's not the one who hired him. The employee was hired by the agent. So whenever there's an agent, that's the middleman who negotiates the term of the employment, the employer can very easily be released of his financial obligations of the halacha, of the law of beyomo titen scharo, of paying that daily employee his due fees. By the way, that's saying it on a very simple level. The laws of finances and wages are very complicated. The laws of mamonot, of money, of finances. But that's just putting it plainly. And of course, I would advise every person who's looking for a job, even if there's someone interviewing you, at the end of the day, the terms and the conditions and stipulations of your payment and your job should always be done with the actual boss himself. But the point is that based on this halacha, on this law, Reb Heschel asks, well, who was it that actually gave the commandments, the laws of the Torah? Was it Hashem? And he says, no. Am Yisrael had a mediator named Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom, which is why it states, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe was the one who facilitated the giving of the Torah on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when we approach Hashem asking for payment or reward for the mitzvot, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could technically tell us, we'll pay you for what? I mean, Moshe is the one who facilitated the giving of the Torah. And according to the Shulchan Aruch, I'm not obligated to fulfill the mitzvah of beyomot titen scharo, because there was an agent who mediated between us. Oh, wow. Well, what do we do now? So Reb Heschel says, it's amazing chidush. Moshe Rabbeinu was indeed the mediator and the facilitator of the giving of almost the entire Torah, with the exception of the first two of the 10 commandments. The first two dibrot are, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. And the second dibra is, Lo yeh lecha Elokim acherim al panai, you shall not have any other gods before me. These two commandments were uttered by Hashem bichvodo ve'atzmo, Hashem himself. As a matter of fact, The word Torah in gematria, in numerical value, is equal to 611. The 611 mitzvot of the Torah, tziva lanu Moshe, were given to us through Moshe Rabbeinu as God's mediator. But the two commandments of Anochi Hashem Elokecha and Lo Yeh Lecha Elokim Acherim Al Panai were given to us by Hashem. Together, that makes 613 mitzvot. But what that means, according to Reb Heschel, is that there are only two mitzvot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu must reward us for immediately, because He's the one who gave us those mitzvot directly without any mediators. And that's the mitzvah of emunah, of faith, of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Those who have emunah and truly believe that God is the one true God. Those who believe that Lo Yeh Lecha Elokim Acherim, that there's no other God other than Hashem. Those who profess their faith by rejecting any kind of idolatry will receive their due reward immediately. Reward for being faithful is something that Hashem cannot postpone or ignore, says Reb Heschel, because He was the direct facilitator of the mitzvot that require us to have emunah. This is very profound, because every time you and I, we discuss the topic of emunah, of faith, every time our emunah is strengthened, each time we express our belief in Hashem, we could be rest assured that there's a package of blessings waiting to come down to us from Shamayim today, not machar, not tomorrow. There's no delay for the reward due a person who has complete faith in Hashem. And not only does he have it, he demonstrates it. Many of the berachot that come down to this world are distributed because of our pure faith. Perhaps that's what the pasuk in Sefer Kohelet is teaching us. Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad. Tovim hashnayim is referring to the first two commandments of the Aseret HaDibrot. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and Lo Yeh Lecha Elokim Acherim. Tovim hashnayim. Those two mitzvot contain within them an abundance of good. You know why? Min ha'echad. Because those are the two mitzvot that we heard directly from the Echad, from the one and only true God. And what happened as a result of the fact that we heard it straight from Hashem. Asher yesh lahem sachar tov ba'amalam. That's why each of us will receive a sachar tov, a very good reward for ba'amalam, for our work and our efforts in the area of emunah. Whereas all the other mitzvot, the reward will be forthcoming in due time, whether in this world or in the next world. Tov hashnayim, these two mitzvot of emunah, of faith, that emanated from the mouth of the Echad, of the one and only God. The mitzvot where we express and we demonstrate our faith in God. Yesh lahem sachar tov ba'amalam. Whatever sacrifices we made in our demonstration of faith to the one Creator will be rewarded immediately. Faith creates a great deal of blessings that can come down to a person's life today. All the more so when there's a zivug, a couple, who's aware that they have a third partner who put them together already in Shamayim, who arranged their meeting here on earth, who's sustaining their zivug. Such a couple whose faith in God is demonstrated through their observance of Torah in their home, through demonstrating their faith by sacrifices that they make for Hashem, not for themselves. A couple who does the will of their third partner with great love and sacrifice and adherence to the mitzvot will indeed be blessed immediately. Take a look at the word sukkah. We're going to be entering the sukkah tonight. Sukkah is spelled samach, vav, chaf, hey. In gematria, a numerical value that equals 91. 91 is the same gematria as the two names of Hashem that represent his attribute of mercy. The Shem Havaya, which is spelled Yud K Vav Hey, which equals 26, and the Shem of Adnut, spelled Aleph, a Dalid, and then a Nun, and then a Yud, which equals 65. That's 91. When you walk into your sukkah this coming Chag tonight, remember that you're in the confines of God's mercy. You're being enveloped by his love and his reminder that he's our God, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, and that there is no other God other than him. Lo yeh lecha elokim acherim. A couple who walks into their sukkah with this understanding, a couple who takes the time to discuss Hashem's greatness, his mercy, his miracles in the sukkah, a zivug who expresses their joy that there were zeicha to bichlal be present in God's sukkah, and how much faith they have in him, and what they're going to do to demonstrate that faith further. The pasuk will be fulfilled upon them. Tov hashnaim min ha'echad. That these two neshamot are acknowledging the echad. These two are recognizing the achdut of Hashem and how there is no other God. Tov hashnaim. Such a combination of these two souls fortifying their faith in their home of the echad. And in the echad, surely will bring about the sachar tov ba'amalam, the good reward that will immediately come down into their life and into their marriage. I want to wish you all a Chag Sameach, a Chag filled with faith and recognition of the echad, a Chag of enlightenment and miracles and the ultimate revelation of Hashem as he ushers us from the sukkah to a world of redemption. Bekarov, amen ken, yehi ratzon.